Hey guys, it's Souten, and I have an announcement to make. We all know my stance on Souten no Ken. Garbage with good art. However, it had a continuation in more recent years. A continuation known as Souten no Ken Regenesis, which I covered a while back, and I said the art was better, but it was mindless fighting. I reread it recently just to see if my thoughts would change, and I'm extremely sorry to say this, but as SNK's biggest hater, it's pretty good. Now you may be thinking, and what happened in between then and now? Well, I'd say the main factor is I'm not fresh off of reading SNK. By the point I initially read it, I was so fucking sick of these characters, the thought of seeing them again was enough to make me want to discredit it. I wasn't really paying too much attention to what the overarching plot was trying to be, and given it's still only 20 chapters, I wrote it off as a fart in the wind with the best shark drawings in fiction. Now, many months later, with SNK for the most part completely behind me, I was able to read it from a more clear perspective. And to be honest, I know this is going to sound like an insane statement, but I think this has the potential to be as good, if not better, than HNK 1. Let's just start with the characters, right? One of my biggest problems with SNK. Cosme, like before, remains mostly unchanged. He's still a generic protag, spewing out one-liners that sound like they'd be posted on a hard image account every single chance he gets. But where we see a change in writing is the other two characters he's with. Yasuko was one of my least favorite things about base SNK. Maybe in the HNK property as a whole. A one-note religious nut who took over the entire end of the story. Now, he's remorseful for what he did to Feion and Erika while he was blinded by misguided revenge. He protects her, but it's not because he wants to take Feion's position as her father figure, it's just to try and atone for what he's done. She even haunts his dreams, as in one scene we see Erika praying over Feion's grave, and when he tells her he's come back, she asks why he even bothered. As unlike every character in base SNK, she doesn't forgive him, and she never pretends like she has. It makes a really interesting dynamic between the two, as later he ends up taking a fatal wound, and even then, he chooses to protect her in his poisoned and dying state. I'm very interested to see where his character goes, especially since someone we'll talk about later is going to have very important ties to him. Erika might end up as one of the most interesting characters in this series, and I don't mean that lightly. You see, Erika was born under the star of the Compassionate Mother. If you recall, this is the same star that Yuria was born under, and would cause so many people to be after her. But unlike Yuria, they seem to want to explore her as a character and what that star truly means. This is introduced to us very subtle, with a bomb strike hitting the orphanage her and the other kids stayed at in base SNK. Instead of looking for a place to hide, she sees some baby birds related to the bird that helped Feion have fallen to the ground. They're panicking and injured, so she runs up to them and covers them with her hands. She falls unconscious afterwards, and when she wakes up, the birds have recovered. There are multiple people she ends up helping in the story by placing her hands on their injuries and soothing them. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but in one of my problems I had with HNK videos, I mentioned how Yuria does this once in the anime and never does it again, and I thought it was really disappointing, as it seemed like an interesting way to play into her power and give her an actual use in the story. Here it's introduced as early as the first 10 chapters, and I'm really happy someone on the writing team seemed to agree with me that it was such a waste to use that on a non-canon scene. So they made it one of the core attributes of the character. She was even able to command someone to stop their actions of violence with this motherly star ability.
And is this just bullshit? As after all, Yuri is the Nanto general. Nanto doesn't fucking heal things, so what excuse could Erika here have?
She knows Tento, a new martial art exclusive to this story. It does a lot, but one of its shown properties is, well, healing people. It's so nice to see them pretty much remake Yuria, but in a more compelling and useful way to the plot. Before, Erika felt so minor I didn't even bother discussing her in the last video. But now she's one of the most intriguing characters I want to see moving forward. Then let's talk about the villains. We're only a handful of chapters in, so there aren't many, but they're really good. Sure, we have a few throwaway goons, and unfortunately someone must have let Hara take over for a second as they brought back the Iron Wig guy who was one of the worst characters in base SNK. But the horrible villains are really in the minority right now, and I hope it stays that way. Our first major villain we get is Culk, who's introduced again in the first 10 chapters. He has proper build-up and feels like a genuine threat. I hate to say it, but Culk here managed to feel way more interesting than 99% of base SNK's villains. To describe him as a character, imagine if Amiibo was actually strong and a threat to the main cast. He's taking people and experimenting on them with his martial art, which also happens to be Tento, which the writers made very clear here is a very dangerous martial art. Story-wise, this is our first introduction to it before Erika, but when he uses it, he can mutate people, disintegrate things, grab through solid objects, fatally poison people by cutting through their flesh, regenerate his own injuries. This dude was a genuine threat and an interesting fight to watch. And I didn't expect to feel that way about any fight in the story, and especially this early on. And honestly, it feels like the story only, for the most part, gets better from there. We get 3 minor enemies next. A bird, a monkey, and a beast. Now if this was base HNK, you'd expect them to be some generic goons, like harder spade type guys. And if this was base SNK, I would have forgot about them by the time I turned the page. But a turn with this story is a lot of the villains have variants of Tento, meaning they all have the potential to kill or at least severely injure Kazumi. For reference, the beast guy of the group slashes into a row of people and they all immediately turn into stone. It feels really good to be genuinely excited and surprised by what the enemies can do again, as the last time this really happened was probably Onryu in HNK 2. Then let me talk about the latest villain. Spoilers for Regenesis, I suppose. After their battle with the monkey, bird, and beast man, the bird gets away, reporting to seemingly higher powers. A bit afterwards, we cut to a mysterious figure holding his decapitated head, and the protagonist gang finds his body with interesting markings. The same markings Fei-Yun would leave on people with his martial art. A bit of journeying later, our main group stumbles into this mysterious figure, and they're giving Kazumi and Yasuka a hard time. Eventually in their fight they manage to unmask this individual and they see it's a woman, named Fei-He. This then leads into a flashback onto her past where we find out she was saved and trained by Fei-Yun at a young age before he left to do what we saw in SNK. When word gets back to her about his death in a very well drawn panel, she's told Kazumi was the one who's killed him, by at the moment more mysterious villain working to capture Erika. All of this is extremely interesting for all of the character dynamics that could play out from. How would she interact with Erika, someone else raised and taken in by Fei-Yun? How will she react when she finds out Kazumi isn't the one who killed Fei-Yun, but Yasuka, who, let me remind you, is currently Kazumi's traveling buddy? I can't wait to see what they do with this character. And I know before I said there's a good chance they could ruin her following off of SNK's writing, but going off of what I've seen here so far, I highly doubt that they'll fumble. So the heroes and villains are good, what about the pacing? All I've described has happened in the first 20 chapters. The pacing here is great. I'll admit the first 5 were a bit slow, but afterwards, it's always focusing on something meaningful to the plot. They spend the right amount of time with foreshadowing, fights, and dialogue, and it just feels incredible, especially when compared to SNK and even HNK 2. I can't wait to see where they go from here. And that's something I haven't said in a while for any HNK side content. Now you may be thinking,
Man, you're only that one cynical hater of the HNK fanbase. Surely you have something to complain about.
yeah, I do have one major. It's tied to the dogshit story known as SNK. I'm not saying that as in I hate this world our characters are living in, but I mean to fully understand what's going on and who these guys are, you're gonna have to read 200 something chapters of shit just to get caught up. But disregarding that and only that, please check out Regenesis. I promise you, it's a great read and you're probably gonna enjoy it. As a professional SNK hater, I love this manga. But with all that out of the way, I'd love to know what you guys think about Regenesis. As always, I'm glad to discuss with you guys in the comments, and I've been in, and I am out.